morning and welcome back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, then this video is for you. But if you're not new to the channel, this video is also for you because I am going to be answering all the questions you guys keep on asking about the cabin. So today I'm going to give you a tour of the cabin and the property, and I'm going to explain everything. I've been getting tons and tons of questions about the same things over and over, so I thought I would take the opportunity to go through the entire cabin, explain everything, and tell you everything I know about it. Today is a beautiful day. It is minus 22 degrees Celsius. The sun is shining. We just got a huge dumping of snow. We got about a foot of snow. So it is the perfect day to be outside. To start the tour, I'm going to start it right here and I'll tell you a little bit about the property. And the reason I'm going to start it outside is because I want to give you the history of the actual property itself before we get inside and start going over everything in there. My dad built the cabin the year I was born in 1987. It is 25 acres and it was vacant land when he bought it. I think back then he paid $5,500 for it. When my dad bought it, he ended up building a small cabin right away and over time has added to it. The original cabin itself was just 4 walls and just a regular roof. The roof has changed, the porch has been added, and an addition has been built on it since then. But in the very beginning, it was just a very small cabin with no porch on it. Having the porch on the cabin is awesome. It is 3-sided, so it goes all the way around everything except for the back. And it's really nice to sit out there on the porch and have like a hot chocolate or a tea or something when it's raining or when it's snowing. There have been a few questions and concerns about why the wood is stacked on the front and how it's blocking the view and how it shouldn't be stacked there, etc., etc. We don't sit on the front of the cabin. There's no seating there. There's no benches. There's no nothing. We usually sit on this side. And as mentioned before, the wood is only stacked here in the winter, not for the rest of the year. So there's plenty of opportunities to look off the porch with an unobstructed view. You can't see that from inside anyways with the porch on it. So looking out the windows, you can't really see anything anyway. You can see that it's daylight. You're not seeing any trees or anything like that. So there have been some questions on why there's a ladder here. The ladder is here so that I can clean off the panels. Sometimes I'll climb up there with a broom and just brush the panels off. There's been a lot of concerns about me climbing the ladder just in general at all, and how there's so many other options that I could be doing, etc., etc. I'm going to tell you right now, the ladder is working just fine. Is there a chance I could fall off it? Yes, there's a chance I could get hit by a car driving home after filming this video. I'm not worried about falling off the ladder. I don't go up there when it's covered in ice. It's not like it's freezing rain and I'm climbing up the ladder. I climb the ladder when the sun is out, there's no snow on it, and I just brush off the panels and carry on. I'm not standing on the roof. I can reach everything right off the ladder. This area behind me is where our fire pit is and our picnic table. So we spend a lot of time there in the summer, spring, and fall. Mostly in the fall and in the spring, because in the summer, the mosquitoes and black flies, horseflies, and deer flies are so bad here. It's really unpleasant to be sitting outside. I have talked about possibly putting some sort of like gazebo sort of thing, roof over the fire pit area, just to be able to sit down here when it's raining. So the talk of putting a gazebo there, it's in the works. I'm not sure if you can see behind me here, there's a little platform with a piece of eavesdrop coming out. That little platform is for a pot. So we put a pot there when it's raining, the pot fills up with water, and we'll boil that to use it for dishes. We don't drink that water, obviously, but it is handy to have that little platform there. Just pop the pot on it, and the eavesdrop just fills it right up in no time. This is the outhouse behind me. There's not really much to say. An outhouse is pretty self-explanatory. This is, I think, the 3rd outhouse we've had here. So I think my dad mentioned something about building a new one this year. I'm not sure, but I think it was this year. So we might get a new outhouse this year. This building behind me is newly built. We just did this year, my dad and I. And this is what I call the sugar chalet, but basically it's a sugar shack for making maple syrup. So like I mentioned earlier, I do maple syrup here. There's plenty of maple trees on the property. So I tap them in springtime, well, usually in like February, and then I boil end of March, beginning of April. So this is awesome. This is brand new, and this season is going to be the first season that I actually get to try it out. The funny thing about this is I was boiling under a tarp for the first 3 years I was doing this, and I decided it would be nice to have sort of just like a roof and a couple walls just to keep the wind off while we were boiling. And somehow we ended up with this monstrosity. This is actually bigger than the initial part of the cabin when the cabin was built. So this is pretty cool. I'm really excited to use this. Let's go inside and I'll show you what it looks like. So this is the evaporator here. It's just made of cinder blocks, and then there's some patio stones on the bottom. There's a little bit of a chimney here. We are still missing an actual piece of chimney to go out this hole here, and then that needs to be filled in, but there's still time to get that done. There's some wood stacked on the side here and some wood stacked outside. We also store the log splitter in here, the four-wheeler, and the plow for the four-wheeler. The trays for the syrup are over there, and honestly, I'm just really looking forward to using it this year. It's going to be awesome to sit inside covered. I cannot wait. The outside here is where I store all my sap in the barrels, so these get cleaned out at the end of every season and then again at the start of the season just to be sure. So I store my sap in here while I'm collecting it, and then once the barrels are full, that's when I'll start boiling it inside. So it used to just be sitting on 2x8s just over there on the ground, but now it's up here on this, which is great. The bucket fits right underneath it perfectly, so I'm really looking forward, I know I've already said this, to using this year. It's going to be great. Behind me up here you can see another little cabin, and that's where I actually sit when I'm hunting. So I sit in that little hut and I hunt out the front window there. It's great because it has a roof over it, so it keeps the snow and the rain off me while I'm hunting. My dad and my brother built that eons ago just as like a little project thing they were doing one weekend that they were up here. Now it's just where I sit to hunt. And if you watch the hunting video, then you'll have seen my dad's tree stand, which has a little wood stove in it, and then my sister has a covered tree stand, which is in another field down there. Primarily, it's just the three of us that come up here and hunt. So there's the two main tree stands that they use. There's this one that I have, and then there's just a couple other random ones that are spread around if somebody else wants to come up and hunt with us. This is also where we do all the firewood. So at home I have a wood burning stove. My dad also has a wood burning stove, and this is where we get all of our firewood from. There was a storm that came through here a few years ago and took down a large percentage of the forest. So there are tons of downed trees, and that's what we've been using for firewood. Honestly, in this lifetime, I don't think we'll be able to even use up all the trees that have fallen down for firewood because there's just so many. But for now, we're just picking away, cutting up what's on the ground and using it for firewood at home. And obviously, of course, on the porch here. I'm not sure you can see behind me on the trees, there's orange tape on some of them. And I marked those trees last year so that I knew which ones to tap in the spring for syrup. Usually I will only tap the same trees twice in a row, like 2 seasons in a row, and then I'll rotate to another part of the property. Last year was the first year that I tapped up here, so I left the markers on, and I will be tapping these trees again in the spring. Next season, that's when I'll move to a different area of the property. I like to just give the trees a break and kind of rotate around just so I'm not drilling holes into the same trees all the time. Right now, I just use a bucket system. So I drill a hole into the tree, I put a tap in it with a line, and it just drips into a 5-gallon bucket. Then I bring it over to the 50-gallon drums that I have set up by the sugar chalet there, and then that's where I store it until I'm ready to boil. The idea of setting up lines is in the background. I have thought about it a few times. Each year the production goes up. When I first started tapping trees and doing syrup, I think I tapped 12 trees. Then I did 25, then I did 50, and I believe this year I'm going to do 100. So the idea of lines is making more and more sense as time goes on. It is a lot of work. Carrying a 5-gallon bucket full of sap is actually quite heavy, especially walking it from here back to the cabin. Sometimes I do put the trailer on the four-wheeler and tow them back, but it's a lot of sloshing around in the buckets, and sometimes I do lose sap. We will see what happens though. I'm not going to count it out. I mean, I probably will end up with lines at some point. I just don't know when yet. For now, I'm going to stick with the buckets because that is what works for me. And honestly, it's January right now, so there is no time to be putting up lines to get ready for syrup season this year anyway. Maybe next year though. There's been a lot of questions on the kind of wildlife that is up here at the cabin. So primarily there's deer, which we hunt. There's also bear, which I've seen here before. There's moose, there is partridge, grouse, there are owls, there's coyotes, there's turkeys, there's a lot of different stuff. And then there's of course a variety of different kinds of birds. I've never personally seen anything like an elk, but moose, deer, bear, partridge, and turkeys are primarily what I see here. And coyotes, of course. Oh, and rabbits. We've got rabbits too. There's not really any other big game that I've ever seen here, but it's not to say there isn't any. I just personally haven't seen any. So the cabin is located in the middle of the bushes. There's a logging road, which is what we use to get to the cabin. It's been here since the beginning of time, I think. So there have been some comments saying that because there's a plowed road to get up to the cabin through the bushes, that this is not considered off-grid, which I don't even understand the relevance of a plowed road. But I will touch on that. The road into here is through the bushes, and it's not a road. It's essentially a road that was cut through the trees to get up to the cabin. As far as the reason why it's plowed, my dad plows it. So there is a plow on the front of his truck, which he uses to plow the road so that we can get in here easily. I've been coming up here since, honestly, as long as I can remember, because this cabin has been here since I was born. Before, like years and years ago when I was little, 5, 6, 7, even up to 12, even 15, really, honestly, we were never able to drive in here. The snow up here was so high that we were never able to get a vehicle up here. We used to park on the main road down there, and then we used to carry all of our stuff in to get up here. It's only in the last few years that my dad put a plow on his truck to be able to plow the road so that we can drive in here. Also, over time, the amount of snow that we get up here has decreased, making it possible for us to drive up here with the truck in four-wheel drive. The fact that the road is plowed now is great. It's a luxury, really, to be honest, to not have to carry our stuff from the road. That pretty much wraps up everything outside. So let's set up onto the porch and then let's go in. So this porch was added on after the fact, many years after the fact. For a long time, it was just the cabin itself. No porch, no nothing. Over time, my dad has added on several things to the cabin, including this covered porch. This is where we store all of our wood in the winter. There has been major controversy, comments, and the wood on the deck has been a very hot topic in almost every single video that I post about the cabin. There have been a lot of comments saying that we should not have wood on the deck for various reasons, but the most concerning reason that viewers have mentioned is because of termites. I will preface this by saying we are in Canada, it is winter, and like I said, it is minus 22 degrees Celsius today. The chance of there being termites on this deck in this wood in the winter is pretty much zero. We have never had a bug problem. In 37 years, there's never been termites, there's never been carpenter ants, there's never been mice in this, there's never been rats in this, there's never been anything in it other than just the wood stacked on top of itself. There's no wood stacked here in the spring or the summer. The wood goes on at the very end of fall for the winter only. That's it. There's also been major concerns about the load of the wood on the deck. Zero concern about the load of the wood on the deck. The deck is properly reinforced and there is no concern for the weight of the wood on the porch at all. Another very big concern or comment or thing that gets brought up almost in every single video is the fact that this wood on the deck is a fire hazard. Our fire is contained in a wood stove inside the cabin, and the fire is never going when no one is not here. So there is zero time when the fire is just freeballing it inside with nobody here. So I'm really not concerned about the cabin catching on fire because the wood is stacked on the deck. That's pretty much it for this deck area. Let's go swing around the front and I'll show you where the solar system is. So as you can see, we've got the solar system here on the outside. The batteries are in this battery bank down here, and the panels are right here. There has been significant comments and concern about why the batteries are outside and why they're not stored inside. The cabin itself is not heated except for by a wood stove. So when nobody's here, the cabin is the same temperature inside as it is outside. In fact, it's colder inside because the curtains are closed, so there's zero sunlight coming in. Whether the batteries are outside or inside makes no difference. It's going to be cold out here and it's going to be cold inside. Should they be stored outside when it's minus 25 degrees Celsius? Probably not. The solar system has been here for, I think, 5 or 7 years, and there has not been a problem with it yet at all. Will it shorten the lifespan of the batteries? I'm not sure, it might, but right now everything is functioning optimally and just the way that we want it. Nothing has happened so far, and the batteries have been stored outside for years. So they are safely tucked away here in this box. Yes, they are outside, but that's just the way that it is. As you can see behind me, there are some lights up here. So around the porch, there are, I think, 3 or 4 solar lights. Those are just for the porch lights for at nighttime when we're outside. If we're having a fire outside, we need to see to get back up to the cabin, or if the kids are tobogganing off the porch, then we have some light outside. It's also good for barbecuing in the dark. And I also do most of my bone broth up here, and I always pressure can it outside. So it's really nice to have the lights outside on the porch so I can see what I'm doing in the dark. Behind me over here are the propane tanks, which have been another huge concern and major reason for people to leave comments. There's a lot of comments about the propane tanks being on the deck and they're going to explode and they're going to blow up the cabin and everything's going to catch on fire. At your home, if you have propane, where are your propane tanks stored? They are stored tucked to the house. They are actually touching the house. The propane tanks in my house are right on the side of my house. They're touching the house and the line runs right from the tank right inside the house. The tanks are stored on the porch with the line running right inside. Not all of these tanks are full. This tank is full because it's for the stove, and this tank is full because it's a backup supply to the propane lights inside. The rest of these tanks are empty. Another concern and question was, why do I have a smoker near the propane tanks? Because it's a fire hazard. The smoker is just sitting here because this is the place that it is stored. When I do use a smoker, it's not right here next to all the propane tanks. I usually take it somewhere else, put it on the grass, put it in the front, put it somewhere else. I'm not letting the smoker right here next to 10 propane tanks. That pretty much wraps up everything outside on the deck. The main questions and concerns were the wood, the propane, the solar system, and the smoker. So I think I've addressed all those, and it is time to head inside where I can actually show you what the inside of the cabin looks like. I'm gonna quickly touch on something before I forget, and you probably can't see from the angle at which the camera is, but the concern for termites is 0, but the concern for porcupines eating the wood is actually a concern. Over the years, there's been porcupines up on the deck eating the wood off the siding. So that's actually been an issue. But aside from that, there's been nothing destroying the wood itself of the cabin. Welcome to the cabin. This is it. All right, let's get started on the tour of the inside. So the cabin used to be just one room, like I mentioned outside, and it's been built on over time. My dad's added to it as the years have gone by. This room that we're in right now is the main room. So it's where we cook, it's where we sit and eat, it's where we spend really all of the time that we're spending if it's not outside. A big question that a lot of people have had, and another concern that people have had, is there's a gap in the top window here, and apparently we're losing heat, and that's been a huge issue for people watching this video. I can assure you, I am not concerned about the little bit of heat going out that gap. It is insanely hot in here all the time because the wood stove in here is so efficient for the size of the space that we're in. There's also weather stripping outside on that door, so there's no heat being lost out that space. Or if there is heat being lost out that space, it's very, very minimal, and you can't even notice it. This is our kitchen here, as you can see. So we've got a counter, we've got a sink here with a drain that leads outside, but as you can see, there are no taps because this is a dry cabin and we have to bring water every time we come here. There's been multiple questions about why we don't have a well, why we don't have a rainwater catchment system, why we don't have a lot of things that have to do with water. And the answer to that question is, we are not here full time. So bringing water with us each time we come up here is not a huge deal. To store water here in the winter, it would freeze. So we don't even leave jugs of water here in the winter because they just freeze solid. As far as the well, maybe at some point down the line, we might dig a well, but right now, this works perfectly just the way it is for us. I'm not really very concerned about having to bring 2 jugs of water here. Most of the time in the winter, we just melt snow to wash the dishes anyway, so it's really not a huge deal. There's no toilet, no functioning flushing toilet, so we don't have to worry about water for that. We have an outhouse outside. So my dad dug a pond down below at the bottom of the hill here. We'll bring water up here for washing the dishes and that kind of stuff. We don't drink it. We always bring drinking water here. So not having water here is not a huge deal for us. Down the line, maybe that might be something we look at, but right now in this moment, it's really not a huge deal for us. As you can see above me here, there's a square in the ceiling because that is where the wood stove used to be. So this room used to be the entire cabin, that's it. So we had a wood stove here, We had a very small section of plywood here where we had one of those Coleman camping stoves on it, where you flip the lid up and there's two little burners on it, and you put the small propane tank on the side, and that's what we used to cook on. The stove is relatively new, I would say probably in the last 10 years or so. This is a propane stove with a propane oven, and that's what the propane tank on the deck is for. There's a line running into this, and this is what we used to cook our food on, which is super handy. It's really awesome to have an oven at hunting season. My mom sends all of the food for us, labeled for every single day that we come up here for hunting season, so it's great to just toss it in the oven and warm it up after you've been sitting out all day long. So it's very, very convenient. Down below here, you can see there's a generator, and that is just a backup for charging the batteries if they get below 50%. I honestly think in the history of us having the solar system, that's happened once. This solar system, I don't know the specs on it. I'll have to look into that for you guys, because that has been one of the other questions I've had. But I do know that the solar system we have is more than enough power for us. It does the fridge and it does the lights, and that's all we use it for. And in the winter, we don't even use the fridge because we just leave a cooler outside on the porch. So we really only use the solar for the lights, essentially. Up here, you can see there are these two lanterns on here. So there's two lanterns here. There's one over the stove. There's one in the other part, and then there's one upstairs. So these are backup propane lights. These were actually the first lights we ever had when we got lights set up in here. We used to use those Coleman lanterns where you pump them up, you put the Coleman fuel in them, you pump them up, and then you light the little mantle that's inside. Then I think after 20 years, yeah, probably about 20 years of the cabin being here, we put these in. This was awesome to be able to come in and just light this lantern and have light in here. The light coming off these wasn't super bright. It was yellow and it was quite dim. Since then, we've upgraded to the solar system, and I cannot tell you what it feels like to come in here and flick a light on and have light. After so long of having to light the lights or not having light in here at all, it's crazy to be able to just turn the light on and have a bright white light in here. This is our table where we sit and eat. We play cards here, and honestly, some major life decisions happen at this table. I've sat here and written out a lot of goals and plans. I do that every single year in December. I sit at this table and write my goals and plans out for the whole next year. So this table used to be at one of the houses that we used to live in. My dad made this table a long time ago. There is a ledge on the wall here, which I'm not sure if you can see, but the table used to actually hook onto there and fold down, and there was a bench in front of it. You just have to remember to watch your head when you stand up here, because sometimes you smack your head on that, which doesn't feel great. One of the hottest topics and one of the things I get the most questions about and comments about is this wood stove. There have been an abundance of comments telling me that this wood stove is not up to code, it's not safe, and it's not a whole lot of things. The way the wood stove is set up right now is perfectly fine for us. There has never, in almost 40 years, been any sort of fire emergency. There's never been a situation where we almost burnt down the cabin. There's a heat shield behind both the chimney and the back of the stove. There has never been a time when the wall has gotten too hot. We've had to worry about maybe it might catch on fire. There's never been that instance ever, ever, ever. There's also been a lot of questions on the stove that we have, why we don't have a more efficient stove, why we don't have a rocket stove, why we don't have a whole lot of other things. I can tell you for certain, this stove makes the cabin so hot that sometimes it's actually almost unbearable. Sometimes we have the windows open in here in the middle of the winter because this stove is so efficient. And I'm not sure if you can see, so this little fan works awesome. It just sits on top of the wood stove. It's 6 blades, it's made of aluminum, and it's completely eco-friendly. It's also silent, so you cannot hear it at all. It simply propels itself by the heat coming off the wood stove, so it's awesome. It's super inexpensive. It was only like $35, I think. And it works great. So I'll leave the link in the description below if you want to get one for yourself. I would recommend this product. It works great. And I think my favorite part about it is that it's quiet. So I'll leave the description below and you can click on that if you want to get one for yourself. We were discussing recently about the possibility of getting a heat pump here. We frequent here a lot. We are here every week. But because the cabin does sit sometimes, it gets very cold inside. So it's colder inside than it is outside, like I mentioned before, because the curtains are always closed, so there's no sun coming in, and it just holds the cold air in here. When we get here and we light a fire, it does take a long time to heat up, so the thought of having a heat pump is kind of nice. It is tempting, so we were discussing that recently, so that might be a possibility in the future. For now, we're okay to sit in here while it's chilly. Usually we're outside anyways while the cabin's heating up. So the way that the heat setup is in here, I'm totally fine with it the way that it is. I'm not concerned about the wood stove catching on fire and burning the cabin down. There's wood stacked beside the wood stove, which I know I get lots of comments on that as well, but if we think about it, we stack our wood beside the wood stove at home too. They make racks for that and people do it all the time. I think it's just the idea that I'm in a cabin and it's made of wood. Everyone thinks that it's gonna catch on fire, but your house is made of wood too. You stack wood near your house. Even if it's in a woodshed, it's still near your house. You stack wood inside near your wood stove. This is no different. We are never not safe here. We are always safe here because we would never want anything to happen to this place. So the concern of the cabin just being engulfed in flames, it's really not a concern at all. This is the pantry here. So this is where we keep all of our plates and dishes and stuff like that. So this doorway here was never here before. This is actually where the cabin used to end, and we used to have just one long bunk going across on the bottom and one long bunk going across on the top. And we could sleep about 4 people in here. That's how this cabin used to be for years. It wasn't until later on that my dad decided to cut this wall out and build an addition on here and add a couple more beds, because there ended up being 8 of us in my family. I have 5 siblings that are all younger, plus my parents was 8, and it just was not enough space in here for all of us. So we added this addition on with a few more beds in it for everybody. And since then we've added an upstairs and now it sleeps everybody. Up here we've just got some racks, and that's kind of where we leave pots of water to warm up instead of sitting on the stove because they just start boiling and evaporating. We also hang our mitts and hats and stuff on here after we come inside, but primarily we just use these racks to dry stuff. Out here is just some more bunks. So there's 2 bunks on this side and 2 on this side. Nothing really to report in here. There's a couple outlets that are solar powered, and that's pretty much all that's out here. And the fridge is behind me actually. Having this fridge here is awesome. The fridge is new. We usually just use a cooler outside on the deck. Obviously in the winter and the fall, that's totally sufficient. In the summer, we do go through a lot of ice having it out there because it does get quite hot up here. Having the fridge here is great. It's also really handy to have it at hunting season because we're usually up here for a week. So like I mentioned before, my mom will make all of our food for us for the week and send it up. So it's great to have the freezer and the fridge to store it all in. And then we just pick away at it as the week goes by. Behind me over here in this door is the bathroom. So you can see the wall in here is the same siding as outside because this actually used to be where the propane tanks are. Right behind that, that's where the bathroom is. So this actually used to be the deck. A few years ago, my dad decided to close in this small area of the deck, and it is now the bathroom. So there's a little RV toilet in here. This is strictly just for using in the middle of the night if we have to go pee instead of running outside in the winter because it's cold out there. So this has been a luxury, honestly, having a toilet inside to use in the middle of the night. It's been awesome. Beside me over here, there's a little washing machine. That's just like an emergency backup sort of thing if we're up here for a week or something and we run out of clothes. But that's here just in case. And then behind me over here, we have the shower. This is the shower here. As you can see, there's no faucet, no taps, no fixtures, no nothing, because there is no water here, like I said. So there is a spigot up top that's attached to some clear tubing. That is where our water comes from if we want to shower. This is kind of just a backup thing. We've used it a few times. The kids have definitely used it if we've left here and had to go to sports or something like that. We did use this over the winter when my bathroom at home was being renovated in the spring, summer, or fall. I'll just run across the street and jump in the lake, and that's pretty much good enough. So this is the upstairs. It's just bunks. It sleeps 5 up here. Most of the time it's just me and my sister sleeping up here, and that's usually at hunting season. For the most part, my kids sleep up here when we come up here, but otherwise it does sleep 5, but there haven't been 5 people sleeping up here in quite a while. There's not really much to report up here. There are some propane lights for backup, and there is, of course, a solar light up top. There's a couple outlets here that are also solar, and that clear tubing I was telling you about actually runs up here. So let me show you where that is. So this is the shower, essentially. So basically, actually this water's frozen, so this is an ice cube inside. So what I'll do usually is fill this up with hot and cold water and make it to an appropriate temperature, obviously, to shower. The clear tubing runs into the bottom of this pot. And then when you open the spigot downstairs, it lets the water from the pot into the shower. It's a pretty steady stream, so it does the job. I mean, we're not in there having super long showers because the only water we have is in this pot. But this pot is enough to do a few showers. Kids have used less than a half of a pot to have a shower each. So this is actually a deceivingly large pot. I don't know how many liters it is. I don't think it says on it, but it's more than enough water for a few showers. that pretty much wraps up the tour of the cabin. Hopefully that answered most of the questions that you guys have. I think the main question and concern is rodents, bugs on the porch, and whether or not I'm going to burn the cabin down, which I'm really not concerned about any of that. Yes, there are things that can be done differently here. Yes, there are things that maybe could be better, but you know what? For us, this is what works right now. Over time, I'm sure there'll be more changes, just like there have been over the last 37 years. But for now, this is kind of where we're at, and this is what works well for us. I do appreciate all the questions and the concerns though, so hopefully that was enough answers for you guys, and that's pretty much it for this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram @_livingdifferent, where you can stay up to date on what I'm doing all the time. I post on there multiple times a day. There's always content on there, even recipes and stuff like that too. Don't forget to check out the website www.living-different.com, where you can have a browse through all the products I have to offer. There are tons and tons of things on there, as well as I actually just launched a whole bunch of new products, so check that out. That's it for this video though. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye.